Chapter 749 Figuring Things Out, 3. It first started with the first cataclysm. A shift in tectonic plates all over Earth. Moving countries from where they previously were, and producing tsunamis and earthquakes in the process. By the end of the first cataclysm, the world map changed completely, creating one supercontinent. Many hypothesized that the first cataclysm occurred so the Earth could acclimate to the mana that would soon enter the planet. It made sense, and I also believed it was the case. I was wrong. So you're telling me the first cataclysm wasn't something that occurred naturally but was instead done by the so-called protector? The first cataclysm, as the world named it as such, was the day that the protector blessed this world with his presence. The nun looked at the statue with reverence. His mere presence brought change to this world. What? The more she spoke, the more confused I become. Despite that, I somewhat understood some of her words. Is she implying that the first cataclysm happened because he came to this world? How powerful was that? Mana was a gift that the protector bestowed upon us from the goodness of their heart. The nun paused, looking at me with a clear smile. Since they bestowed upon us this power, it is only fitting that the protect decides who should keep the power and who shan't. Am I right? I think I've heard enough. What she said, it was enough to make me understand what was going on. Why did the protector bless us with mana? If they were too afraid of us getting too much power, why even give us the power in the first place? It made no sense. The motives of the protector aren't things that the likes of us can understand. The nun replied, we must appreciate what they have already blessed us with. Right. I found myself tearing my gaze away from her and focusing it on the statue. Is this what you were trying to show me, Kevin? This so-called protector. While I wasn't sure about the specifics behind this so-called blessing, I knew for a fact that it had something to do with the records. The clues were there. The laws in Octavius's body, Matthew's words, the nun's words. Everything linked to the records. Whoever this protector was, they were most likely with the records, perhaps even their creation. This protector of yours. I looked at the nun. There was something else I was curious about. Do they have a name? Protector of the Seat of Diligence. That was more of a title than a name. I'm sure whoever this protector is, they must have a name, right? Or do they just go by titles? Name. The nurse looked at me incredulously. How would the likes of me know? The true name of the protector is not something we can know. Only protectors can know the name of other protectors. There are others? How should I say? I somewhat expected it. It looks like my earlier hunch wasn't wrong. Perhaps the term diligence was truly the same diligence as the one in the 7 virtues. Wouldn't this mean there are 6 other of these so-called protectors around? I found myself frowning at the thought. One was already scary enough. 6 more? I could only shudder at the thought. Creak. The wooden door of the chapel creaked and I broke free from my thoughts. When I raised my head, my eyes paused on a certain figure. He looks familiar. That was the first thing I thought when my gaze paused on him. It was so dimly lit that I was unable to get a good look at who had just entered. But the moment I laid my eyes on them, I felt a sense of familiarity. Ah, if it isn't our most esteemed benefactor. I was surprised by the nun's words as I turned to see her rushing toward the man who had just entered the chapel. Following her back, I heard a certain voice and my breath stopped. Sister Viviana. It's nice to see you again. If it isn't little Oliver. It's so nice that you visit us despite being so busy. It's what I must do. Are these gifts for us? It's just a little something I picked up while coming here. Don't mind it too much. Why aren't you kind, Oliver? Oliver? Waylon. I now understood why I felt that he looked familiar. Upon casting a closer look at him, the man that stood before the nun was indeed Waylon. He looked exactly the same as I remembered. Uncannily so. Oh, how rare. It looks like you have visitors today. Finally taking notice of me, Oliver smiled and waved his hand at me. I smiled back and waved at him. It's nice to meet you. What have you come into this rundown place for? He walked up to me while looking around the chapel. It isn't often that I come to visit, but it's usually just me and Sister Viviana. I've never seen anyone else here. You can say it's a breath of fresh air. Is that so? The way he carried himself and his speech was the same as the Waylon that I knew. I've been coming here for the past 2 decades, and you're the first person I've seen come into this orphanage. Past 2 decades? I looked at Waylon in surprise. He's been coming here for the past decade? Oh yes. He's such a lovely young man. Each time he comes he always brings gifts for us and the children. The nun, a Sister Viviana, patted Waylon on the shoulder. We would have been in quite a lot of trouble if it weren't for him. I must say he really is a sweetheart. You flatter me too much. You flatter me too much. Waylon scratched the back of his head in embarrassment. I pursed my lips at the sight. There was something unsettling about the current situation, but I couldn't tell what it was. The more I observed Waylon, the more I felt that there was nothing wrong with him. He was indeed normal, in the sense that his body did not contain akashic laws. But the very fact that he was here was alarming. If I may ask. I scratched the side of my neck while keeping my eyes focused on Waylon. What is the reason you're here? How did you find this orphanage? That's a question I'd like to ask you instead. Waylon smiled as he put the gifts he brought toward the nearby bench. This isn't a very well-known orphanage. There are many out there and I'm surprised you managed to find this one. Technology advances quite fast. I chuckled a little. It wasn't really that hard to find. Plus, you can say that I came here for a purpose. He came for the protector. Sister Viviana suddenly said, happily taking the gifts that were resting on the bench. The protector? Waylon looked at me strangely before looking toward the statue behind me. Don't tell me you actually believe the story behind the protector? Who knows? I smiled at Waylon. It's a fascinating story, I'll give her that. It indeed is. Waylon smiled and tidied his clothes. He then checked his watch. Oh, it looks like my time is up. I have to leave now. My daughter will nag me if I'm late today. She seems adamant about making sure I came home today. Something about helping a friend of hers. You're leaving already? Sister Viviana looked rather saddened by that fact, but that was as far as it went. She didn't try to convince him to stay. You know how Emma can be when she's angry. That's true. Sister Viviana giggled. Say hi to her for me. Will do. He proceeded to put on a light brown coat before turning his attention toward me. Well, it was nice meeting you, young man. I hope you enjoy your stay here. Thank you. I smiled and waved at him. After that, I watched him peacefully leave the orphanage. What a poor man. Just then, I heard Sister Viviana's voice. I turned to look at her. Poor man. What was she trying to imply? If you would mind. He passed me some of the gifts and I took them. After that, I followed her into the deeper ends of the chambers. Oliver, that child. Do you know why he always comes here? No. I shook my head. I was honestly clueless in that regard. Sister Viviana stopped in front of a wooden door and opened it to reveal a small room. Walking in, she set some of the gifts down. I'm getting quite old for this. She stretched her back with both hands on her sides. At the same time, she looked at the room with a gentle smile. This orphanage once was quite popular. It wasn't as run down as it is now, and it was all thanks to Juliana. While listening to her words, I set the gifts down. Juliana. His wife. My brows jumped a little. His wife used to work here? Indeed. Sister Viviana nodded her head. You can say that she's the only reason he's still been coming here after all these years. A pity that Emma doesn't want to come here. I quite miss the little girl. Right. I could more or less understand why Emma refused to come here. Given her character, she probably didn't want to be reminded of her mother every time that she came here. I knew her well enough to tell this much. It really is a pity. She was such a lovely girl. She looked so much like Juliana. There was clear regret on Sister Viviana's face as she said those words. It became clear to me that she was close to Emma's mother. I looked around the place. I think it's about time I leave. I'm satisfied with what I've learned. Is that so? That's a pity. Sister Viviana reluctantly said, placing her hand over her cheek. I wanted to show you the children. Maybe next time. I smiled at her. Next time it is. She opened the door for me and we both went out. Young man, just a reminder before you leave. Hearing her voice, I turned to her. Don't let yourself be led astray. Choose the right side. Chapter 750, Figuring Things Out 4. Don't let yourself be led astray. Choose the right side. Don't let yourself be led astray. Choose the right side. Don't let yourself be led astray. Choose the right side. Ha. I laughed when I thought back on those words. Was she threatening me? It sure as hell sounded like one. It didn't matter much to me anyway. Whether it was a threat or not, I already knew which side I was on. There was no need for her to remind me. Walking around the empty streets in front of me, I mused back on the words Sister Viviana told me. There was quite a bit of information that I learned. So Waylon's wife used to work at the orphanage, huh? But most importantly, I came to learn of a very strange fact. The fact that Waylon's wife formerly held a position at this orphanage was interesting. It clarified why he continued to come here after such a long time, but what remained unclear to me was whether or not they were connected to the so-called protector. A pity I don't really know much about Waylon. Emma was the only person he ever mentioned in any of his conversations. Other than that, I didn't really know that much about him. In addition to that, it wasn't really within my rights to inquire about his wife or his past at all. It wasn't any of my business. Things are different now, though. When my thoughts paused thus far, I took out my phone and dialed a number. How can I help you? I smiled the moment I heard the voice coming from the speaker of the phone. It was very polite. A stark contrast to how it was a while back. It's nice to hear your voice again, Jerome. I have to say, you've done a good job so far. Haha, it is only right that I do this much. The smile on my face grew larger when I heard his words. I did the right thing by getting them on my side. They saved me a lot of trouble. Is there a reason why you've called me? Yes. I paused and looked behind me at where the orphanage was. Although it was quite a distance away from where I was standing, I was still able to make out the details. Thinking about my time over there, the smile I previously had on my face faded. Search everything regarding the orphanage I sent you previously. Ashton City Community Orphanage. As if the instruction wasn't clear enough, I repeated the full name of the orphanage. I felt as though I was close. Close to finding what Kevin was trying to show me, and closer to finding the key to the identity of this protector. So long as I figured out what was up with this orphanage and who this protector was, I'll finally be able to get out of here. Tell me the date of its founding, its founders, how it was 20 years ago, just any information that you can find about them. Useless or not useless. I want everything. I paused. Don't miss anything. Regardless of how trivial it is. It's very important that I know everything about the place. The Rochefield family had a rather sizable main residence. The home could be considered one of the largest in the city, with more than 10 bedrooms, 12 bathrooms, and a total floor space of more than 76,000 square feet. Inside the mansion, beside a large oval wooden table. Hear this, Dad? Emma pointed her fork at her father while still chewing on her food with her mouth open. Chew with your mouth closed. Shut up. Amanda sat next to her, chewing her food with her mouth closed and only consuming small portions of the food in front of her. She was considerably more refined than Emma, and if there was one thing she couldn't stand about Emma, it was the fact that she chewed with her mouth open. He hated the sound. Why are you always hounding me about that? Because it's disgusting. Emma rolled her eyes. Whatever. Having said that, she complied with Amanda's request and started eating her food with her mouth close. Swallowing her food, she looked at her father and continued. As I was saying, believe it or not, someone actually said that Amanda is not fitted for the sword. Oh. Oliver's brows raised and he looked at Amanda. Is what she said true? Amanda nodded her head but did not respond. After chewing and swallowing her food, she wiped her mouth with her napkin and then she finally spoke. Yes, it's true. That's rather surprising. Oliver sliced the piece of steak in front of him. Did anything come out of that statement? No, not really. Emma answered for Amanda. Amanda said she still doesn't believe him. That's also the reason why I brought her here today. Oliver smiled while bringing the slice of steak to his mouth. You wanted to confirm with me whether I agreed with that statement or not? Chewing on the steak, he cleaned his mouth with the napkin on his lap. Then you don't need to mind those words, Amanda. Do what you feel is right. Back then, I said you were fitted for the sword because I believe that you are indeed talented in that aspect. Your results have shown me that my words are right. You're indeed quite talented for the sword if you consider your progress. If someone had to rank people based on rank, then Amanda could be considered at the top of the human race. She alongside a couple of others. Jean Horton and Emma being examples. You've gotten to where you are with the sword, and if you were to change now, you'd have to start all over again. He paused and put the fork down. It's not worth it. The night's breeze, which was rather brisk, blew her hair in all directions, scattering it all over her face. Amanda supported herself by placing her hands on a metal handrail and raising her eyes to the moon in the distance. It brought peace to her mind. It's not worth it. Amanda gave the words that Oliver had shared with her during the meal a lot of careful thought. You've gotten to where you are with the sword, and if you were to change now, you'd have to start all over again. His words make sense. The more she mused on those words, the more she felt that they were right. As he said, if she were to truly change her weapon, then she'd have to start all over again. By then, everyone she had left behind would catch up to her. She wasn't too sure if that was the right move. What to do? The decision should have been an obvious one. However, when she thought about who had said those words, Amanda couldn't help but find herself hesitating. If his strength was similar to hers, then she might have scoffed at him. However, this wasn't the case. She was unable to fathom the depths of his true powers. She had no chance of ever catching up to him, and Oliver, the one who told her to use the sword, had no chance of defeating him either. It was only logical that she listened to him. But which weapon should I change to? That he never specified. All she could remember was him telling her that she wasn't fitted for the sword. He never actually elaborated on his words. Ugh. Amanda found herself massaging her head. Thinking about him, whose name she still didn't know, she felt her head throb. That being said, thinking at the time she'd spent today training with him, she unconsciously felt her lips curl. I guess it wasn't bad. Chapter 751, Figuring Things Out. 5. What odd power. Drawing my attention was the white viscous film that was coating my hand. The power felt rather gentle, and I sensed no rejection from it. At a glance, one wouldn't be able to tell that this power I held was something that far surpassed mana in terms of power. Too bad I don't have a good grasp on it. The most I could do with it at the moment was just move it around my hand, albeit extremely slowly. I attempted to channel it, but unlike the mana that flowed freely around my body, the Akashic laws proved to be much more difficult to manipulate than I had anticipated. If mana was like water, then the Akashic laws were like peanut butter. It just refused to move forward. Even demonic energy is a lot easier to control than this. I extended my other hand and watched as a black film covered my other hand. The process was smooth, and the black film moved around my hand in a smooth manner. It was right when I was playing with the demonic energy inside of my body that I noticed something. What's this? As I brought my right and left hands closer together, I was surprised to feel a sense of opposition coming from the two powers. It was rather weak, but it was there for sure. Are the two of them rejecting each other? I pressed both hands together and closed my eyes to feel whatever was going on. It wasn't long before I felt something, and I opened my eyes in surprise. Indeed, it looks like the two powers are rejecting each other. It was very faint, but I could feel it. I stopped halfway and hurriedly looked toward my palms. It was there that I noticed the demonic energy pushing back the Akashic laws. What's going on? I immediately grew intrigued and channeled more demonic energy into my right palm. Gradually, I watched as the demonic energy pushed the Akashic laws around more and more. What in the phenomenon fascinated me, and I understood why this was happening. Compared to the laws, the demonic energy was a lot denser. There wasn't a lot of Akashic laws in my body as compared to demonic energy, and I had a sudden thought. What if I used demonic energy to help me move the laws better around my body? The concept piqued my interest, and I did not squander any time before putting it into action. The results were immediate. The moment that I started channeling the demonic energy inside of my body, the Akashic laws started to move against it. Almost in repulsion, and suddenly I felt myself getting more and more familiar with this new power. I had the urge to release the power at that very moment, but when I thought about a particular possibility, I dismissed the idea. I didn't want to blow this place up by accident. I stopped channeling my demonic energy and took a deep breath. If only I had a little bit more. The laws that I had in my body, they were still a little too thin for me to control properly. While I indeed found a solution with the demonic energy, it was a little taxing. I think that'll do for today. It was more important for me to get more familiar with it before using it again. So to avoid any problems, I slowly stood up from the ground. I was currently in a high-end training ground, courtesy of the Green Paw Guild. I figured this was the best place to train. Due to my unfamiliarity with this new ability, I determined that this was the best location to train in case something went wrong. If something truly did happen, I wouldn't really feel guilty about it. Covering my mouth, I stretched my back. Ding. A sudden notification stopped me and I turned to look at my watch. When I pressed the message, I noticed it contained a file. Akodotics. They are truly a lot more efficient than I gave them credit for. I tapped on the file and several files appeared on my watch. I carefully read through them, not missing a single sentence. Going through each and every one of the files didn't take me very long at all. About an hour, and by the time I was finished, I wasn't sure how to react. There was a lot more information than I expected. I felt complicated, but I think I know how to get back now. It was a delightful day in Ashton City. The sun hung in the sky, illuminating all that was beneath, and a gentle breeze accompanied the light. In a certain park. You're quite a hard man to find. My gaze fell on a certain man. On one of the park benches, he was scattering breadcrumbs towards a small flock of pigeons. Bobbing their heads up and down, they wrestled and tackled each other to get to the crumbs. Have you found the answer that you were looking for? More or less. I sat down on the same bench. Hey, go ahead. Seeing how he was enjoying himself while feeding the pigeons, I decided to give it a try myself. I scooped up a few of the crumbs and flung them in the direction of the birds. By the time it took me to blink, the crumbs were already gone. It's rather calming, eh? You call this calming? I handed him the bag back. This wasn't for me. Not a fan. Matthew took the bag and then continued to feed the pigeons. It looked like he was having a good time. What are you going to do next? He asked while keeping his eyes on the pigeons. I took a moment to muse over my thoughts before leaning back on the bench. Although I've found a clue, I don't know whether it's the right clue. I'd have to check back to my world to check the validity of it. Emichum. Matthew threw a handful of crumbs to the pigeons. His expression was rather hard to read. Does that mean that you want to go back? I can go back? I was surprised by the sudden revelation. Could I finally go back to my own world? You can go back. Matthew repeated, reassuring me that I didn't hear incorrectly. I immediately found myself getting excited at the words. No, wait. But I was quick to calm myself down. While I do want to go back home, it's still too early. Thinking about a few things, I found myself calming down considerably. There were still a couple of things I needed to get done here. So, do you want to go back? Hearing Matthew's voice, I turned to face him. I found myself pursing my lips. How long can I stay in this world? You want to stay? Matthew appeared quite surprised by my words as he raised his eyebrows and stopped feeding the pigeons. Loosening his hand, the crumbs fell through the gap between his fingers. Why do you want to stay? I thought you wanted to go back. I want to remind you that the people here are not the same people you know. This world. It's not your world, nor is it real. Well, I smiled and stared at my hand. Real or not real, it doesn't really matter to me. While the people of this world are so much weaker than those of my world, there's still a lot that I can learn from them. The three grandmasters. They were indeed a lot weaker than I currently was. That being said, in the few short instances where I had the pleasure of learning from them, I understood that their mastery over the sword was far greater than mine. There was so much that I could learn from them, and leaving such an opportunity behind did indeed feel like a pity. That is, of course, granted by the fact that the time I spend here is faster than my world. If time flows the same, then I guess I have no choice but to go back. The war with the monolith might have been over, but that was merely the start of the true war that was about to come. I couldn't afford to waste time. You don't have to worry about that. Matthew smiled. Kevin has already made the necessary preparations. If you want to stay, you can stay. Just that I don't know for how long you can stay for. He raised his head to stare at the sky. Perhaps a couple of days? A week? Perhaps even a month, I'm not sure, but when the time comes, I'm sure you'll know. That's enough. Honestly, it was a bit less than I wanted, but it was just about enough. I knew from the very beginning that I was merely a visitor of this world and that I'd soon leave it. Well, that's great. Matthew patted his hands and stood up. Once you're done, you can find me again. I'll be in this park. Got it. Nodding my head, I watched him leave and heaved a long sigh. I guess I should make do with the time I have. For I knew that the moment I returned to my world, it'd be the same moment I entered hell. Chapter 752, a world where he doesn't exist. As my sword tore through the air in front of me, I noticed a trickle of sweat running down the side of my face. It had been a while since I practiced with the sword, and I sort of missed this feeling. The discomfort which I subjected myself to on a regular basis in order to improve my strength was not something I particularly enjoyed. I much preferred this to that. Swoosh. It had also been a while since I started sweating during my training. Swoosh. Swoosh. I think that's enough for today. A voice called out from the back and I stopped. I turned my head and as I did so, my eyes stopped on Grandmaster Keiki, who was coming in my direction. He was grinning to himself in a relaxed manner. You've been training like crazy for the past few days. I think you should take some time to rest. He tossed me a towel and I grabbed it. I wiped my face and stabbed the sword into the ground. You see, I don't really have much time left here. Matthew's words weren't clear before, but I could feel them now. I had the distinct impression that I did not have a lot of time left to enjoy life in this world. I want to learn as much as possible before leaving. He didn't exist in my world, sadly. If there was a time when I could learn from him, then it was now. I couldn't afford to waste a single second. You're leaving? Where to? The news appeared to take Grandmaster Keiki by quite a bit of surprise. It seemed as though he hadn't expected my sudden departure. He looks better. When I looked at him, he appeared to be in much better shape than when I had first found him, and that made me smile. I'm going back home. You don't live in Ashton City? Thinking of my world, I shook my head. No. I live quite far away from here. A place only I could reach. Oh. Grandmaster Keiki nodded his head reluctantly. That is unfortunate. I really wish that you could have spent some time with my family. If only I could, I'd be happy to put you in touch with them, but... He shrugged his shoulders. It's all right. I appreciate the gesture. I wiped the side of my face with the towel. The situation of the three grandmasters was still a little sensitive. It wasn't so much that Octavius didn't want to absolve them of their wrongdoings. Rather, it was more that he found it difficult to persuade the general public of their crimes. At the same time, the protector also existed. If he could do it, then it was going to be a long and slow process. One that may take months or maybe even years, and sadly during that time they wouldn't be able to visit their families. Seeing his grim look, I shifted the conversation away from his family. Anyways, is there something else you suggest I take note of when practicing? Oh. Grandmaster Keiki's eyes finally lit up and he soon nodded his head. Yes, as I've confirmed to you on multiple occasions over the course of the past week. You are going to need to keep practicing the fundamentals over and over again. Please don't get the wrong idea, they are not bad. Rather, your fundamentals are already at a level that most people won't ever reach in their lifetime, but... He paused for a moment. It's just that it's the only thing you haven't mastered. As opposed to the movements which you seem to have quite the hang of, your basics are the only thing that you don't have a solid grasp on. Just stick to them and you'll find yourself improving. Extending his hand, he retrieved the sword from the ground and slashed it. Swoosh. Just slash and slash and slash. That's really all there is to it. Keep slashing until you feel as if it's second nature to you. Once you get that done, everything will become much easier for you. He handed the sword back to me. I see. I took the sword from his hand and stared at it. Just slash and slash and slash? That sounded easy enough. It wasn't impossible. Anything else? No. He shook his head. That is the extent of the complexity involved. If you can just keep what I told you in mind, you'll be able to make significant progress in no time. The same can be said for the two other forms of swordplay, the Gravar and Levi-Shah styles. Even though there are some key differences, they are all based on the same principles. You won't have trouble getting the hang of them when you solidify your fundamentals. I understand. I threw the towel to the ground and took a stance. So he's saying that if I keep training my fundamentals, then learning the other two sword arts should also be easier. Not just the Keiki style. That made a lot of sense, and I found myself wanting to facepalm. Because I was so rushed to increase my power so much, I neglected to train my fundamentals as much as I should have. Although they weren't terrible. In fact, they were quite good. They weren't perfect, and at this point perfection was what I needed the most. I paused for a moment and smiled bitterly. Actually, more than me neglecting them, it has more to do with the fact that I have only lived in this world for about 8 years. Had I had more time, then I was sure my fundamentals would have been perfect. A pity I didn't. Swoosh. I slashed the sword once more. Thump. Something tore through the air and landed with a thud on a small target approximately 100 meters away from the location where the source of the noise originated. Staring at the target in the distance, Amanda frowned. Am I really talented in this? She had a very clear view of the target even though it was far away. It was currently riddled with arrows, but none of them hit the target in the bullseye mark. She had been attempting to hit the target for a week and had yet to succeed. It felt rather depressing to her. This was hard. She took a deep breath. Honestly, she was really doubting the validity of his words. No matter how much she thought about it, she didn't feel suited for the bow. It's still too early. She took another deep breath and calmed herself down. After getting a feel for the bow in her hand, she gave the string a very light pull. As a direct result of this, her gaze became fixated on the object in the far distance. She could see it quite clearly. This wasn't a surprise to her. She had always had good eyesight. But that didn't mean anything when she couldn't even hit the target in the first place. The bow creaked slightly as she pulled the string. Feeling the wind around her, she waited. Waited for the perfect moment for her to let go of the string. The moment came sooner than she thought. Feeling the air around her still, Amanda let go of the string. Thump. Amanda was able to see everything that had transpired in that instant, despite the fact that not even a second had passed since she let go of the string. It was as if time had slowed down and all she could see was the arrow. She watched as it tore through the air, slicing through it in the most delicate way possible, before finally coming to rest against the yellow mark in the distance. Staring at her arrow that had pierced through the target, Amanda felt her mind go blank for a moment. She blinked her eyes several times as she tried to make sense of what had just occurred in her head. When she finally succeeded, her face became flushed with excitement and she leaped into the air. Yes. She had never experienced anything like the rush she felt when she realized she had finally hit the target. It was so exhilarating that she could feel the heat rising in her cheeks. This feeling was awesome. It looks like you've made some progress. It was at this moment that she heard a certain voice, and her initial excitement died down. Calming herself, she turned around to face the voice. When did you get here? Just now. He seemed rather laid back as he stared at the target in the distance. I'm rather impressed. In just a week you've managed to improve so much. He had a look on his face that seemed to say, I told you so. It irritated Amanda for some reason and her initial excitement wore down. What did you come here for? To check on your progress and to say goodbye. Amanda was stunned to the point that she couldn't move from where she was standing, as if she had been hit by lightning. Say goodbye? You're leaving. I have to leave. Amanda felt her mouth go dry, but she soon nodded her head. I understand. You must miss your family. I do. He happily smiled. Amanda had never before witnessed him smiling in such a way, and to be completely honest, the sight of it caused her to temporarily lose her breath. I guess, he doesn't look like a squid when he smiles like that. Not that she would admit to him. When will you be leaving? Amanda set her bow down and wiped her sweat with a clean white towel. Soon. He answered while following the bow with his eyes. How soon? I'm not entirely sure. He raised his head and looked up toward the ceiling, or something distant. Amanda couldn't quite make out what it was. She eventually let out a long breath. If you're leaving so soon, why don't you have dinner with us? I'm sure my dad and my mom both want to apologize to you for what happened a while back, and the same goes for me. She found herself unable to utter those words, but it didn't seem as though she needed to. Following his gaze, she could tell he could see right through her, and he soon smiled. Sure, why not? Great, I'll tell my dad. Amanda happily smiled at his words. For some reason she felt excited by the idea. I guess, in a way, she was thankful for what he'd done for her. Sadly, what she didn't know was that he'd agreed knowing that it wasn't possible. See, crack. The world froze over and cracks appeared within the space surrounding the two. After that, everything shattered as though it were made of broken glass and the world turned white. Chapter 753, a world where he doesn't exist. The color white dyed my vision once more. The world around me shattered into a million pieces, and I found myself standing on a clear floor. As I bent my head forward, I was able to see my own reflection. It seems like you've run out of time. The voice. I tilted my head to the side in order to get a better look at Matthew, who had seemingly materialized out of thin air. He was smiling at me. Did you manage to learn what you were looking to learn? Sort of. The time was brief, but I was somehow able to improve myself. It wasn't as much as I'd hoped I would improve, but it was better than nothing. That's good to hear. Matthew mumbled, staring at the white world around him with a complicated look. Then it looks like my mission is completed. I wanted to meet you at the park because I liked the view there, but I guess that isn't possible anymore. He raised his head up and sighed. Well, that's that. I guess. You can say that I'm now officially dead. The smile that spread across his face when he said those words seemed rather forced. I couldn't tell since his head was turned. When you mean officially dead, it means what it means. Matthew looked at me. The only reason I was in this world to begin with was to wait for you. My real body. Well, you should already be aware of what happened to it. My mind started going back to the incident that took place at the monolith, and as it did so, I found myself closing my eyes. This world. He continued. It was nice. It was peaceful. It was everything that I thought Ashton City would be like if the demons never existed. I've lived in this place long enough to say that I was happy. I opened my eyes again to stare at him. Thinking about his words, I found myself asking, do you really think that world is one where the demons don't exist? The history of the world suggested as much. The fact that Kevin didn't exist in that world was also an indicator that the demon king Jezebeth had never existed. Yet for some reason I couldn't get something out of my mind. If the demons never existed, why don't I exist? Why have I never been born in that world? There were no records about me despite of how hard I looked for them. Rindover didn't exist in that world and I didn't know why. About that. Matthew scratched the side of his head. I'm not sure either, to be honest. I assume it's because two Wrens can't exist in the same world or for some other reason like that, but I don't know, nor will I ever know. I just know that Kevin wanted to show you something and I hope you found your answer. I have. I found myself nodding. Although I'm not entirely sure about the validity of what I found, once I return, I'll be able to confirm everything. Then I can only wish you the best of luck. Matthew smiled and extended both hands to the side. I looked at him strangely. Don't tell me that you want me to who? No. He cut me off, laughing almost. Like I've said before, make sure you're gentle this time. It might be the very last time I experience pain again, but I still wish for it to be something that I don't have to go through. A sword appeared the moment his words faded. When I raised my head to look at him, I found him smiling at me. Come on, I didn't take you for someone who's indecisive. Get this over with. Let me finally have some rest. I found myself at a loss for words, but I soon took a deep breath. All right. I gripped my sword tightly and moved forward. I only came to a stop when I was a few meters away from Matthew and placed my blade against his neck. Make sure it doesn't hurt. He reminded me, making me laugh a little. I'll try. All right. He seemed to recall something. As he scratched the side of his face, it appeared as though he was at a loss for the appropriate words to say. After some time, he gave his head a slight shake and then looked directly at me. I'm sorry. Alliance Master. I could hear faint words echo in the background of my mind. They were rather faint. Alliance Master. With time they grew louder and louder. Ring. That was until I became aware that my body was shaking and my head had jerked forward. When I opened my eyes, I was immediately surrounded by bright light and my eyes stung. What's going on? Where am I? When I turned my attention to my surroundings, I noticed that I was in the middle of a sizable office. In front of me was a wooden table where papers were scattered, and behind it was a rather large window. Have you finally woken up? Ryan. To my surprise, I found Ryan standing in front of me. He was attired in a gray suit that was completely unfit for him. It was ridiculously oversized and he hadn't even bothered to tie his tie correctly. What are you doing here and where are we? I massaged my forehead and looked up. Actually, as a matter of fact, if I don't recall wrongly, you called me Alliance Master. Are you okay? Instead of an answer, I received a worried look. Looking around the place, Ryan retrieved a small bottle from his ring and passed it to me. Take this potion. It looks like you've been overworking yourself. I stared at the potion for a moment before taking it. Perhaps he was right. The taste of the potion was rather bitter and I noticed that it helped clear up some of the fog in my head. A shame about the flavor, because if it hadn't been so astringent, I would have plowed through it in a single sitting. Feeling better? A little bit. Didn't really make a difference, but at the very least I felt more alert. So, I looked around me without saying anything. The office space. It looked similar to Kevin's, but it was also different. There were several pictures in front of mine, all of which seemed to be drawings that Nola had gifted me a while back. There were also pictures of my parents and Amanda. The more I observed, the more confused I became. Ryan, where are we exactly? Ryan looked at me weirdly once again. Seeing the worried look on his face, I spoke before he had the chance to. Just answer me. Alliance headquarters. Alliance headquarters. I see. I massaged the bottom part of my mouth. And I'm the Alliance Master, right? Ren, are you sure you're all right? Just answer me. Yes. If you were curious, then yes, you are indeed the Alliance Master. I felt my head throb even harder. What happened while I was gone? Lowering my head and staring at my watch, I realized that not even a single day had passed since Kevin's passing. This confused me even more. Ryan. Yes. I'm curious about something. The location of the nearest hospital? Can you stop it with that? I glared at Ryan and he lowered his head. Taking a deep breath, I finished what was left of the potion. Kevin. What happened to Kevin? I had a bad premonition when I asked that question. For some reason, I felt that the recent incident wasn't the only thing that Kevin had done. And Ryan's next words served to prove my hunch. Kevin? Who's Kevin? Ha. I smiled. As expected. My hunch was indeed correct. What he showed me wasn't the only thing he had done. From the looks of it, he appears to have erased himself from everyone's memories. Do you need some information on someone called Kevin? What's their last name? No, never mind that. I waved Ryan off and took out my phone. He's not even in my contacts. Looking through it, I realized that Kevin was no longer in my contacts. Opening my social media, I also realized that he was gone from there and that there was not a single mention of him on the web. I was an avid follower of Kevin's social media, so I knew better than anyone that he was gone. It was as if he had completely vanished from the world. Fuck. I turned my phone off and leaned back in my chair. Nothing. There was nothing left of him. Without a doubt, this should be my world. While all records of him had disappeared, I knew that this was the world I belonged to. It was just that Kevin's previous achievements had been given to certain others. History was practically the same. Why did he? No, I can tell why. It didn't take a scientist to figure out his intentions. He, as awkward as he was, didn't want those to whom he was close to suffering because of him. He didn't want them to cry over him. He knew that his death would prevent some from ever moving on, and he didn't want that. Heh. In a way, he wasn't that different from me. If I were put in a similar situation to him, I probably would have made the same choice as him. He really was a pushover. Ren, is there something that you'd like for me to do? What? I'd like to return to Pelehu work. Ryan's voice broke me out of my thoughts, and pretending not to have heard his final words, I nodded my head. Yes, actually, I'd like for you to do several things for me. Chapter 754, Protector of the Seat of Diligence. 1. I kind of understand why those in power always like to have a window behind their office. I felt my shoulders drop and my body loosen up as I stood at the window and looked down at Ashton City. Staring at the city that was once again filled with people, I found myself relaxing. The view wasn't so different from the world I just came from. Ha! I inevitably let out a sigh. Even though the view was beautiful, I couldn't help but feel a rush of a variety of different emotions whenever I thought about the one responsible for making this whole thing possible. Are you really finding that everyone is forgetting about you, Kevin? It rubbed me the wrong way a little bit that everyone was going about their day celebrating the peace, and yet they had no idea who it was that made it this way. What irritated me the most was the fact that I was getting all of the credits that were supposed to belong to Kevin. Things weren't supposed to go this way. I unknowingly found myself clenching my fists tightly. If there was a way to make everyone remember, I'd do it. Ding. Here's the information you've asked me to look for. I don't think I've missed anything out. If that's not enough, give me a message and I'll see what I can do. As expected, Ryan's the best. The message was attached to a small file, and when I opened it, I discovered that it contained a great deal of information along with a number of pictures. They were incredibly detailed and contained all the information I could possibly want. He was indeed someone whom I personally recruited. If only Small Snake was still here. I felt my mood plummet thinking about him. If there was anyone else who was good at getting information, it'd be him. Doc. It was then that someone knocked on the door. Come in. I sat myself back down in my chair. Did you call for me? A lethargic figure walked in. After entering the office, he took a quick survey of his surroundings before finding a seat in one of the chairs that were directly across from mine. Liam, it's nice to see that you were able to get here without a problem. Huh? He cocked his head to the side, confused. Was there supposed to be a problem? You say this when you can't even remember where the mercenary headquarters are. Liam blinked a couple of times before leaning back on the chair. We had a mercenary headquarters? I pressed my hand against my forehead. As expected of Liam. Anyways. I rubbed both of my hands while taking a closer look at Liam. There was something I needed to check. Perhaps taken aback by how long I was looking for or by my gaze, Liam sat up straight. Is something wrong? Why are you looking at me like that? I didn't answer and continued to observe him. The longer I looked at him, the more certain I became of my assumption, and I noticed that my mood became more serious as a result. As expected, it really was the case. Rin. It wasn't until that point that I finally became aware that Liam was standing in front of me, waving his hand in front of my face, that I snapped out of it. What are you doing? No. I thought there was something wrong with you since you weren't responding. I'm fine. Sit back down. I waved at him and leaned back on my chair. After he had taken a seat, I rubbed the underside of my chin and lightly tapped my finger against the surface of the desk. The more I think about it, the more it makes perfect sense. Liam. I called out his name. He cocked his head. Yes. I think I may have found the reason for your memory problems. Upon hearing my words, Liam's eyes widened quite a bit, and before he could respond, I extended my hand in front of me, and all of a sudden, a white substance coated my hand. I should have realized it long before. Stay still. Let me see the extent of the laws that are placed within your body. Sushi. On a training ground that was otherwise empty, Emma practiced her swordplay with two short swords. Whenever she swung her blade, strands of her hair would fly into the air and land on her face, where they would become affixed to her skin due to the sweat that had accumulated. She wasn't sure for how long she'd been at it, but it was only when she was completely gassed out that she finally stopped. Itchy. Her chest burned with each breath. I feel empty. For some inexplicable reason, Emma felt empty. She had no idea why she was unable to shake this feeling, but it had been plaguing her for the past few days, and she couldn't figure out how to get rid of it. What is wrong with me? The more she thought about that emptiness, the more she felt it turn into something else. She wasn't sure. It was either that or something else. She just couldn't figure out what was bothering her. Fuck. I hate this. Staring at her short swords, she stood up and resumed practice. It was the only thing that helped her ease her mind away from that empty feeling. Sushi. Her short swords pierced through the air as her figure danced across the training grounds. Wherever she went, the sound of wind slicing accompanied her every movement. She was fast, extremely so, leaving behind afterimages of herself as she stabbed, slashed, and pierced through the air. Holding her breath, she increased the pace continuously. Her lungs were burning and her muscles were aching, but she continued. She was in a state where the pain was what helped her relieve that feeling. She looked forward for the pain. This only lasted for 5 minutes, however. Plank. Dropping both her weapons to the floor, Emma grabbed her shirt and wiped her face. Just what is wrong with me? She found herself unable to focus on her training. Whenever she tried, that feeling would resurface again, distracting her from her practice. Drip. Feeling something drip down her cheek, Emma froze for a moment. Something stabbed her in the chest and she found herself clenching her shirt. Why am I like this? What was going on with her? What was happening to her? Why was she like this? Fuck it. Unable to find an answer, she kicked her swords away and headed for her room. She had enough training. Following a speedy shower, Emma proceeded to detangle her hair while sitting in front of a sizable mirror. As she looked at her own reflection, she noticed that the empty feeling she was feeling was starting to dissipate. What was that? She wasn't sure whether to feel relieved or not by the fact that the feeling had gone away, but as she stared at herself in the mirror, she was startled to find that several tears were streaming down her cheeks. What's going on? She stood up, wiping her tears with her sleeves. Why am I suddenly crying out of nowhere? Rubbing her eyes with her hand, she continued to wipe away the tears that were falling. Fuck. Cursing out loud, Emma put the brush away and headed down the stairs of her house. The house was rather empty, and by the time she took the last step toward the ground floor, she heard the sound of the door ringing. Tongue. Is it Dad? Surprised, she went ahead and opened the door. What surprised her, however, was a sight completely different than she had expected. Standing in front of her was someone she knew all too well, not just her, perhaps the whole world, and raising his hand he waved at her. Hi. It was Rin. I apologize for the lack of updates. I just recently flew back to Italy from Dubai, and found myself dead tired. I know I'm 8 chapters behind, and you don't have to worry. I will try to make up for them. On another note, because time here is 3 hours behind Dubai, I might change the update time to 8 p.m. Italian time since I barely have enough time in the morning due to my classes, which is the main thing that's taking up my time. I apologize again and will try to make it up ASAP. Chapter 755, Protector of the Seat of Diligence. The world was eerily quiet. The sky was a brilliant shade of blue, and there was a sense of calm permeating every part of the world. The grass that covered the surface of the land leaned over as a light breeze moved past it, ruffling the hair of a particular figure that quietly sat over the grass. While he was sitting on the grass, his figure seemed to melt into the background, giving the impression that he was a part of the natural world. He had always enjoyed this type of atmosphere. It reminded him of his home world when everything was still peaceful and he was just a child. Only in such worlds would he feel a sense of peace. It was unfortunate that he didn't get to enjoy such sense for very long when all of a sudden, his figure shook and his eyes gradually opened to reveal 2 crimson pupils. At the mere opening of his eyelids, the world around him gradually lost its color and appeared to come to a halt. Turning his head, his gaze peered through the world, coming to a stop in a certain direction. The curse. His little mumble caused the surroundings to shake and he gradually stood up. Lowering his head to stare at his hands, his white brows came together tightly as his usually calm expression stilled completely. It's gone. Rumble. It had been a while since Jezebeth felt his composure falter. However, as he felt the link between him and Rin disappear, he knew that the curse he had placed on his body a while back had been removed. How is this possible? He wasn't one to let emotions get the best of him, but at the moment, Jezebeth found himself experiencing such emotions as his chest slowly heaved up. This shouldn't be possible. I've made sure that the Siu. He stopped himself mid-sentence. As he opened his eyes, his vision sharpened as he peered through the space he was in, focusing on a planet in the far distance. It was an azure-colored planet he was all too familiar with. His eyes gradually opened up in shock. He's gone. Jezebeth remained immobile, dumbfounded by the sudden occurrence as his hair was blown forward by a second breeze. Why can't I sense Kevin? Jezebeth closed his eyes and tried to sense Kevin's presence. As someone who also wielded the power of the laws, Jezebeth could sense him anytime he wanted. It was also why Kevin never really went away from Earth. If he did, Jezebeth would know. Unfortunately, he also had the means to return to Earth before he could ever reach him. Otherwise, he would have finished him off by now. Gone. Jezebeth reopened his eyes and was taken aback by the abrupt situation. No matter how hard he looked, Kevin was nowhere to be found. How is this possible? Was he somehow able to find a way to hide away from him? It was the only thing that could explain the current situation. No. It was right when Jezebeth felt that he had gotten an idea of what had happened that his body turned stiff. Why can I suddenly feel him? He couldn't feel Kevin, but he could feel Ren. How was this possible? A certain thought suddenly occurred in his mind and his face finally showed signs of change. He was in such a state of shock that he soon found himself chuckling. Covering his mouth with his hand, he bent over slightly. Don't tell me he actually... I was right, wasn't I? The more he thought about it, the more the realization of the matter hit him. He already had a hunch beforehand, but it had never been clear. Now, however, he was sure. Kevin had transferred his powers over to Rin. To think he'd go that far. Jezebeth continued to laugh. His laugh was neither loud nor quiet, but it spread through every inch of the world and birds scattered away into the air. I can't believe he'd do that. Jezebeth's mind was filled with complex emotions as he stopped laughing. He was neither angry nor pleased with the current circumstance. In fact, he felt rather sad. His already lonely life had just gotten lonelier. A pity. I wanted to at least say goodbye to him. Although they were never friends and always at each other's throats, Jezebeth never despised him. He understood his motives and never really took his actions to heart. At the end of the day, they were just two people who had conflicting interests. That was all there was to it. It really is a pity. Jezebeth stared blankly at the sky before him. For some inexplicable reason, he found it to be less colorful than he'd previously thought. Perhaps this was a perfect reflection of his own state of mind. Plink, plink, plink. As he extended his hand forward, a number of metallic fragments appeared in his grasp, and Jezebeth stared at them with a complicated look. Everyone he knew was slowly leaving, and these shards were the only things left of his parents. It had saved his life a while back. Back when the protectors tried to cleanse his race. Had it not been for these shards, he probably would have never been alive. One could say that the only reason his race had ever gotten a chance to rise was because of these shards that once made up a small cube. To this day, he had no idea where this cube came from, and the only thing he knew about it was that it had once fallen from the sky, landing directly over where his parents were. At least that was what he had been told. He had been too young back then. He wasn't entirely sure of the origins of the cube, but he didn't really care. I'll find out once I get my hands on the records. But all answers were within the records. So long as he got his hands on them, he'll get all the answers he's ever hoped for. Soon. He clenched his hand and the shards disappeared into thin air. He took a few deep breaths as he kept his gaze fixed on the planet in the far distance. In the next breath, a small portal opened up from beside him and a small figure walked out of it. What is it? His tone didn't sound very respectful. Rather, it was anything but respectful, but Jezebeth didn't mind. In fact, he rather liked the way he spoke to him. Jezebeth stared toward the sky. How long have we known each other? About 2 Earth years? The figure replied, his tone sounding somewhat confused by the sudden question. What's with the question? Just curious. Jezebeth replied with a smile. 2 years, huh? Time seemed to fly a lot faster than he had originally thought. He felt a little lonely at Kevin's death, but he wasn't completely alone. There had been someone keeping him company for the past few years, and he didn't quite dislike his company. In fact, he rather enjoyed it. A pity that they had only known each other for a meager 2 years. Is there something else that you need from me? You didn't call me just to ask me how long we've known each other, right? The man's tone of voice contained a hint of exasperation in it, and Jezebeth found himself laughing in response. I suppose that he finally understood his gaze to some extent back then. No, it's just that. Jezebeth shook his head and continued to stare at the sky. A smile soon formed on his lips. It looks like you'll get your wish granted sooner than I originally anticipated. Huh. Jezebeth extended his hand forward, and the planet began to shake violently. Rumble. The ground broke apart and molten rock erupted from cracks and fissures in the planet's crust. The clouds in the sky began to disperse, and the elevation of the mountains increased. Rumble. Rumble. The world underwent drastic changes within the space of a few seconds, and it didn't take long before the calm and serene scenery that had been there moments before vanished. Jezebeth slowly brought his hand to a close as he stared at the landscape with compassionate eyes, and then, everything vanished into thin air. The world turned completely dark, and silence reigned over Jezebeth's surroundings. In the distance, one could see white specks scattered all over the darkness while a bright orb stood before Jezebeth. Staring at it, he took a deep breath. He had a rather complicated look on his face at the moment. I didn't think the time would come so soon. He motioned with his hand and the orb moved toward him. I thought I had a bit more time to enjoy this scenery, but this is good enough. With him gone, everything's changed. Gently stopping over Jezebeth's palm, a powerful wave spread from the orb's body. It scattered across the surroundings, distorting the space he was in. All it took was a simple wave of Jezebeth's hand to make the distortion disappear. He turned to look toward his right. Are you all right? Ah, yes. That's good. Jezebeth flashed a grin as he moved the orb closer to his mouth and then proceeded to swallow it. The instant that the orb made contact with his tongue, the surrounding area came to a complete and utter standstill, and Jezebeth's skin began to radiate a dazzling white light from its surface. After Jezebeth had closed his eyes, the light faded away, having initially illuminated a large portion of the space that encompassed him. At that moment, Jezebeth's hair grew by an inch, and the muscles all throughout his body expanded ever so slightly. An ethereal aura encircled his entire being. Opening his eyes again, the crimson that had been present in his pupils began to fade away, and a coloration with a distinct purplish-red hue took its place. Turbid air escaped from his mouth as he exhaled. Staring toward his right and left hands, he finally let out a satisfied smile. "I've finally done it." He slowly clenched and unclenched his fist. He felt a tremendous power run down his body. Turning his head to the left, he took another deep breath. "I am complete." His eyes glowed with a brilliant hue that illuminated a considerable portion of his surrounding area. A fissure quickly manifested itself in the region directly in front of him, revealing the image of a planet. It was completely green and a white barrier surrounded the world. Jezebeth took a step through the opening while he kept his gaze fixed on the planet. But just as he moved, he recalled something and turned around while motioning with his hand. "Come, Brian." He smiled in the calmest of ways. "Come see for yourself why they call me the Demon King." Chapter 756, Protector of the Seed of Diligence. "What are you doing over here?" Emma's voice was laced with a hint of confusion as she looked at me standing at her doorstep. I knew it was a strange move on my part, showing up unannounced at her house, but I had my reasons. I peeked through the door and pointed towards the interior, hoping she wouldn't turn me away. "May I come in?" The strangeness in Emma's expression became more prominent, but after thinking for a while she stepped to the side, letting me in. "Well, sure, I guess. It's not like I can stop you anyways." "Thanks." I grinned, relieved that things were flowing more smoothly than I had expected. As I stepped into her living room, I took in the surroundings. The hall was cozy with warm lighting and a plush sofa. But my eyes were drawn to the tall chandelier hanging from the ceiling, sparkling in the soft light. For a moment I thought that I felt something. I was sure of it. I must have been staring at it for too long because Emma's voice broke through my thoughts. "So, care to tell me why you're here?" She closed the door behind her and crossed her arms. I paused, looking around the place until my eyes fell on the chandelier once again. Sensing something, I smiled. "You can say that I'm here to meet your father." "Hi, Dad." Emma's eyes widened in surprise. "Do you have an appointment with him or something?" "Well, you can say so, I guess." I didn't have an appointment with him, but I had a feeling that he would be willing to meet with me. Emma's expression was a mix of confusion and curiosity, and she tightened her robe around her waist, a sign that she was becoming more guarded. "That makes sense," she muttered, looking around the room as if trying to spot her father. "I'm not sure where he is now, so I guess you can There's no need for that." I cut Emma off and she looked at me with a confused expression. "Huh." Once again my gaze drifted toward the chandelier and I smiled. "There's no need for me to wait. He's already here." "Hua." Jezebeth's chest heaved up the moment he stepped into the planet. The fresh air of the world filled his lungs, and a smile spread across his features as he took in the vast vegetation that surrounded him. His breath caught in his throat as he looked around him, taking in the thousands of elves that were gathered, their bows drawn and exuding an incredible pressure that upset the air around them and caused them to distort. Haha. Jezebeth recognized them immediately. They were the last remaining elites of the elves, those that hadn't gone to Earth with their job to guard over the demon world that connected to this world. Jezebeth felt a wave of nostalgia wash over him as he gazed at the familiar faces before him. He had missed them dearly. Addressing the crowd, his lips curled ever so slightly. "It looks like you all caught on to my presence?" The elves remained silent, their gazes fixed on Jezebeth. "Demon King." Suddenly, an ancient voice spread across the world, and the space distorted open. An elderly female figure walked out from the void, followed by a younger female elven figure. The younger one was rather handsome with crystal-clear blue eyes and long silver hair. Surrounding her body was a silver armor that shone under the sun that hung in the sky. The presence of the two instantly took over the previous pressure emitted by the thousands of elves and focused it on Jezebeth. It was a pity that Jezebeth showed no reaction to the pressure he was subjected to. Staring at the two, Jezebeth smiled. It had been a long time. He missed them. Placing his hand over his chest, Jezebeth elegantly bowed his head. "It is an honor to meet you again, protector of the seed of patience." protector of the seat of charity. Raising his head, he grinned, exposing his pearly white teeth, and continued. I've missed the two of you so much. The air stilled at his words, and the two elves stared at Jezebeth from above. Their gazes were still, and there was no apparent change in them. In spite of that, one could feel their demeanor slowly shift as a white glow started to surface from within their bodies. The elderly elf raised her hand and brought it down. Attack. Sushi. Sushi. Heeding her words, the elves surrounding Jezebeth all let go of their bows, and over 1,000 different arrows shot in his direction. Shio. 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 The power contained within each arrow was strong enough to distort the space in front of them, and it wasn't long before they all appeared before Jezebeth, who remained calm despite the situation. Extending his hand, the arrows came to a sudden stop. Now. His gaze never left the two figures in the air as his hand gently moved, and the arrows slowly turned away. It isn't that bad of an attempt, to be honest. A white glow similar to the two figures above surfaced within his hand as the arrows that were pointing at him all turned to face the opposite direction. Now. Jezebeth let out a satisfied smile when all the arrows turned, and his head cocked to the side. With his eyes on the two protectors, a light breeze brushed past him, scattering his hair forward. Feeling the power surfacing his body, the faces of the two protectors changed, but it was already too late. Watch as I exterminate all of your forces while all you can do is watch. Snap. It was just a snap. Single snap was all it took. At that moment, the arrows disappeared from the spot, and red rained across the plain, basking Jezebeth underneath it. It's been many years since I felt like this. I guess I missed it. Extending his hand and letting himself get basked in the red, Jezebeth took another deep breath. He relished the smell of blood that lingered over the air. Crack. Waving his hand, the world behind him distorted and several portals appeared behind him. The portals were black and twisted, and the very air around them seemed to be infused with demonic energy. From behind the portals, several demons emerged, each releasing an incredible aura that filled the air with ominous energy. The demons knelt before Jezebeth, their heads bowed in deference to their leader. We greet His Majesty. We greet His Majesty. We greet His Majesty. Jezebeth paid no mind to their words as his gaze continued to lock toward the protectors above. Gradually, more and more elves appeared from out of the trees, bows and staffs drawn. They formed a formidable line, determined to protect themselves from him and his army. Yeah, this is how it should be. It wasn't long before he was faced with a number that was drastically above the one from before, and a gradual smile formed on his face as he took in the view. The thought of what came after their death made his blood boil, and as he opened his mouth, he directed his voice toward the demons behind him. Kill anyone that puts resistance. Take in those that are willing to surrender. His words were like a call to arms, and the demons eagerly obeyed. With a fierce battle cry, they charged toward the elven army, their demonic power unleashed in a fury of fire and brimstone. Within the next few weeks, I want this place cleaned. Those were the last words he said before appearing right before the two protectors. His gaze fell on the woman wearing the silver armor, and he happily smiled at her. She was someone he'd never forget. Your race does not belong to in this universe, was it? An unwanted parasite? Their existence is a threat to the universe. He nodded his head, a smirk forming on his lips. I guess you were right. I walked down the dimly lit hallway, the soft glow of the flickering light illuminating my path. As I approached Waylon's door, I found that my legs were becoming heavier the closer I was to the door. Secretly, I hoped that whatever I was assuming wasn't true and that I was simply making a mistake, but... Doc. I knocked on the door. Come in. It was only after his confirmation that I finally walked into the office. If you'll pardon my intrusion. Pushing the door open, I stepped inside the office, the familiar scent of old books and paper hitting me. Looking around the room, it seemed like a rather normal office with a classical desk in the middle, a large window behind him, and pictures of Emma around. Yup, very normal indeed. What brings you here, Ren? Waylon stood up from his seat and greeted me. He seemed rather pleased by my appearance as he had a large smile on his face. It's nothing much. I greeted him back with a smile and shook his hand. I then found myself a seat in front of him. Making myself comfortable, I took a good look at him. At a glance, there was nothing abnormal about him. He looked like the Waylon that I knew, the man who had been with me in the Dwarven domain and the man whom I risked and entrusted my life with back at the Inferno headquarters. Nothing much? Does that mean you've just come to visit me for the sake of visiting? Waylon made himself comfortable in his chair and similarly leaned back. I didn't think someone as busy as you would have the time to visit me out of nowhere. Ha ha. I laughed while scratching the back of my head, the tension in my body slowly easing. I wasn't actually busy. To be honest, although I was the current Alliance head, I pretty much designated all of my work to Ryan and Octavius. They were the ones that actually did most of the work. All I needed to do was sign some papers and show my face once in a while. I guess I now know the reason why Kevin became an Alliance head. There are times when one needs a break. I had so much work lately that I needed to take a breather, and since Kevin's not here, I decided to visit you. I held my breath as I muttered those words. I pleaded with every inch of my body that he'd answer differently from what I assumed he would. And, Waylon nodded his head in understanding, his eyes twinkling with amusement. That makes sense. Kevin doesn't have it easy either, does he? I must say he's probably having a harder time than you with all the Alliance stuff and all. My heart sank and I leaned further back onto the chair. My mind flashed back to the events that had led to Kevin's disappearance and what came after. Everything pieced itself together and I let out a soft breath. So, funny that you mentioned Kevin. I pursed my lips and stared him directly in the eyes. Thing is, he doesn't really exist in this world anymore. So how is it that you still know about him?